My name is Mallory, and am 28 years old. Last Christmas Eve, I stood on my mother's frozen porch in 28-degree weather, holding a paper plate of cold turkey while hearing laughter echo from inside the house. My mother's voice cut through the window like ice, telling my stepsister how wonderful it was to have family who truly appreciated her. My fingers were numb, my tears were freezing on my cheeks, and in my coat pocket was a crumpled lottery ticket I hadn't even checked yet. I had absolutely no idea that crumpled piece of paper would destroy them all. But before we dive into how $100 million jackpot became my weapon of revenge, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and while you're at it, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story gets wild. Trust me, you'll want to see how the family that humiliated me ended up begging for mercy. Now let's go back to the beginning, to the years of torture that led to that frozen porch. Growing up, I learned early that I wasn't the daughter my mother Constance wanted. She was 52 now, remarried to Leonard who was 55, and completely devoted to my stepsister Genevieve, who was 25. My father died when I was 8 years old, and my mother remarried when I was 10. From the moment Leonard and Genevieve walked into our lives, I became invisible. Actually, worse than invisible. I became the problem child, the difficult one, the daughter who could never measure up to perfect Genevieve. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Genevieve attended private school while I went to the overcrowded public school across town. When Genevieve turned 16, she got a brand new car with a bow on top. When I turned 16, I got a lecture about responsibility and started working 2 jobs to save for a used sedan. Genevieve's college was fully paid for, every cent covered by Mom and Leonard. I went to community college on loans and worked night shifts at a diner to cover my textbooks. Every achievement I earned was diminished, every mistake I made was magnified, and every tear I cried was dismissed as me being too sensitive. The pattern started with small cruelties that built into major betrayals. My senior year of high school, I saved every dollar from my part-time job at the grocery store for months because I wanted to buy a beautiful dress for prom. I had $300 hidden in an envelope in my dresser. 1 week before prom, the money disappeared. When I asked my mother about it, she barely looked up from her magazine. She told me she borrowed it for Genevieve's spring break trip to Florida and she'd pay me back eventually. She never did. I wore a dress from the thrift store to prom while Genevieve posted beach photos in a designer swimsuit my money had purchased. The second major betrayal came during my senior year when I got accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship. I was so proud, so excited. I needed my mother to fill out the financial aid forms so I could get additional grants and loans to cover the rest. She refused. She claimed she was too busy, that the paperwork was too complicated, that I should have applied to cheaper schools. The real reason became clear when Genevieve mentioned she wanted to take a gap year to find herself in Europe. My mother didn't want to split resources. Genevieve got her European adventure fully funded while I deferred my university acceptance and worked full-time for a year to save money. Fast forward to now. I'm 28 years old, working as a medical billing clerk making $35,000 a year. I live in a tiny apartment with second-hand furniture and am still paying off my student loans. Meanwhile, Genevieve is 25, unemployed, living rent-free in Mom and Leonard's spacious home, and draining their bank account on shopping trips and spa days. She's never held a job for longer than 3 months. She claims she's waiting for the right opportunity, something that matches her talents, though nobody can quite identify what those talents are. My mother calls her sensitive and artistic. I call her lazy and entitled. Despite everything, despite years of being treated like the help while Genevieve was treated like royalty, I kept showing up to family events. I kept hoping that maybe this time, my mother would see me. Maybe this time, Shed hug me the way she hugged Genevieve. Maybe this time, Shed ask about my life with genuine interest instead of immediate criticism. The extended family saw everything. My Aunt Margot, who was my mother's sister, watched the favoritism play out at every holiday gathering. My cousins noticed. The neighbors noticed. But everyone stayed silent because confronting Constance was like sticking your hand in a hornet's nest. She'd sting you with words so sharp you'd regret ever speaking up. The gaslighting was constant and suffocating. Any time I tried to express hurt or frustration, my mother twisted it back onto me. I was too sensitive. I was imagining things. I was jealous of Genevieve because I couldn't handle seeing someone else succeed. She'd tell me I needed therapy for my anger issues while Genevieve could throw screaming tantrums at 25 years old and get comforted with shopping trips. Leonard, my stepfather, enabled everything with his passive silence. He never defended me, never questioned Constance's treatment of me, just nodded along and wrote checks for Genevieve's endless wants. I became an expert at swallowing my emotions, at pretending the cruelty didn't hurt, at showing up with a smile even though I knew I'd leave in tears. My therapist, the one I paid for myself because my mother said therapy was for weak people, asked me why I kept subjecting myself to their abuse. I didn't have a good answer except that deep down, some pathetic part of me still believed my mother might change. That maybe if I was good enough, successful enough, patient enough, she'd finally love me the way she loved Genevieve. I was 28 years old and still seeking approval from a woman who'd spent 18 years showing me I'd never receive it. Christmas Eve started the way every holiday with my family started, with me showing up full of hope and leaving destroyed. I arrived at my mother's house that morning with carefully wrapped gifts that had cost me half my paycheck. I'd bought my mother a cashmere scarf she'd mentioned wanting, Leonard a book on woodworking since he'd taken up the hobby, and Genevieve a silver bracelet that was far more expensive than she deserved. I walked through the door with my arms full of presents and my heart stupidly open. My mother took one look at me and her nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something rotten. She informed me that my outfit was inappropriate for a family gathering, that my hair looked messy and unkempt, and had I gained weight since Thanksgiving because my face looked fuller. It was 9 in the morning. I'd been in the house for less than 60 seconds. Genevieve emerged from the living room in yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt, her hair in a greasy bun, and my mother cooed about how naturally beautiful she looked. The gifts I'd brought were placed on the table without a thank you. Genevieve's gifts, which she'd purchased using Leonard's credit card, were exclaimed over like she'd personally crafted each one. I offered to help cook dinner since we were hosting 12 people. My mother handed me every unpleasant task she could find. I scrubbed potatoes covered in dirt. I cleaned the greasy roasting pan from the night before. I took out 3 bags of garbage that should have been Leonard's job. Meanwhile, Genevieve sat in the living room scrolling through her phone and occasionally wandering into the kitchen to sample food. When the turkey came out of the oven perfectly golden, my mother thanked Genevieve for being such good company while she cooked. I'd been working in that kitchen for 4 hours and I got a criticism about not washing the cutting board properly. The afternoon brought the first major confrontation. I went upstairs to use the bathroom and past the guest room where I'd left my purse. The door was open and Genevieve was inside, bent over my bag with her hand, literally inside my wallet. I stood frozen in the doorway for a moment before my voice returned. I asked her what she was doing and she jumped, clutching my wallet to her chest. She smiled that sticky sweet smile she used when she was caught doing something wrong and claimed she was just looking for gum. I grabbed my wallet back and flipped it open. It had $60 in there that morning. Now there were 2 20s left, $40 gone. When I confronted her, said my money was missing and I knew she'd taken it, Genevieve's eyes went wide with fake shock. She gasped like I'd slapped her and ran downstairs yelling for Mom. Within seconds, my mother appeared at the bottom of the stairs with an expression of absolute fury. She demanded to know how I dared accuse my sister of theft. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but Constance talked over me, her voice rising with each word. She called me jealous, vindictive, cruel. She said I'd always been jealous of Genevieve and now I was making up lies to hurt her. Leonard appeared behind her, shaking his head in disappointment. He called me dramatic and said I was ruining Christmas with my accusations. I was forced to apologize, forced to stand there while Genevieve smirked behind my mother's back and say I was sorry for suggesting she'd stolen from me. My mother wasn't satisfied with just the apology. She made me hug Genevieve and tell her I loved her. I did it because the alternative was being thrown out before dinner. And some sick part of me still wanted to be there, still wanted to be included. Evening arrived and relatives started showing up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. The dining room table was set beautifully with my mother's fancy china and crystal glasses. I counted the place settings as people arrived. 6 chairs. My mother, Leonard, Genevieve, Aunt Margot, Uncle Bernard, and Cousin Bethany. 6 people, 6 chairs. I was the 7th person. My stomach dropped as understanding dawned. I asked my mother where my seat was, and she looked at me with cold, calculated cruelty. She said we only had 6 chairs and someone had to eat elsewhere. Genevieve, ever the performer, suggested maybe I could eat in the kitchen. She said I wouldn't mind, right? I was always so understanding. My mother nodded eagerly, like this was a perfectly reasonable solution. I stood there looking at the table I'd helped set, at the food I'd helped prepare, at the family I'd driven 30 minutes to spend time with. And something in me finally broke. I said it was Christmas. I said I was her daughter. I asked why I was the one being excluded when there were 7 of us and only 6 chairs. Why couldn't someone give up their seat? Why couldn't we bring in a chair from another room? My mother's face transformed into something ugly. She started yelling about how I was ungrateful, how I was always complaining, how I ruined every holiday with my negativity. She said if I didn't like the arrangement I could eat outside. I thought she was being hyperbolic, using exaggeration to shame me into compliance. But when I didn't immediately back down, when I said I just wanted to eat with my family, she pointed to the front door. She told me to take my plate and eat on the porch or leave and never come back. The room went silent. Uncle Bernard looked uncomfortable. Cousin Bethany stared at her hands. Aunt Margot's eyes were shiny with tears, but she said nothing. Leonard crossed his arms and nodded his agreement. Genevieve watched with barely concealed glee. I asked my mother if she was serious and her voice went ice cold. She said outside now or get out permanently. Those were my options. Eat alone in the freezing cold or lose my family forever. My hands shook as I took a plate and loaded it with food. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, stuffing. My mother didn't help. She watched me prepare my own plate for the porch like I was staff being dismissed. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the December night. The temperature was 28 degrees. My breath came out in clouds. I could hear Christmas music starting inside, hear laughter and conversation, hear my mother proposing a toast to family. I sat down on the cold wooden porch steps and tried to eat. The food turned to ash in my mouth. Tears ran down my face and froze on my cheeks. Through the front window, I could see them all gathered around the table. I watched my mother smile and laugh. I watched Genevieve take a selfie with her dinner. I watched Aunt Margot glance toward the door once, guilt flickering across her face, before she returned her attention to her plate. The door opened behind me and I thought maybe someone was coming to apologize, to bring me inside. It was Aunt Margot. She came out quickly, glanced back toward the house nervously, and handed me her coat. She whispered that she was sorry and told me to stay warm. Then she went back inside before anyone noticed she was gone. I put on the coat gratefully, my whole body shivering. As I slipped my arms into the sleeves, I felt something crinkle in the pocket. I pulled out a lottery ticket and a small piece of paper. The note was in Aunt Margot's handwriting. It said, "Sometimes luck changes. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." I sat there on that porch for 20 more minutes before I finally gave up and went home. As I stood to leave, I looked through the window one more time. My mother was opening presents. Genevieve was wearing the cashmere scarf it bought for Constance. My gift had been re-gifted right in front of everyone and nobody said a word. That was when something inside me finally shattered completely. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and cried until I had no tears left. I was done. I was done hoping, done trying, done believing they'd ever see me as anything but a burden. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up feeling hollow. My body ached from sitting in the cold. My eyes were swollen from crying. I made coffee and sat on my second-hand couch staring at nothing. The coat Aunt Margot had given me was draped over a chair and I remembered the lottery ticket. I pulled it out along with the note, read her words again, and felt a tiny flicker of warmth in my chest. At least one person in that family had shown me a shred of kindness. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the lottery website almost absently. I wasn't expecting anything. The ticket was probably worthless, just a kind gesture from the one relative who'd bothered to acknowledge my suffering. I looked at the winning numbers posted for the Christmas Eve drawing and started comparing them to the numbers on my ticket. First number matched. Second number matched. Third number matched. My heart started beating faster. Fourth, fifth, sixth, all matching. I dropped my laptop. It clattered onto the coffee table and the screen went dark. I picked it up with shaking hands and refreshed the page. Certain I'd made a mistake. The numbers were still there. All 6 numbers. Perfect match. I checked the ticket again. Held it up to the light like maybe it was a fake. The numbers stared back at me. Clear and undeniable. I went to the lottery website homepage and saw the headline. $100 million jackpot won. Single winner in Michigan. Ticket sold at Quick Mart on Riverside Drive. That was the store 2 blocks from my mother's house. The store Aunt Margot drove past every day. The ticket was real. The numbers were real. I was holding a winning lottery ticket worth $100 million. I started hyperventilating. My vision went spotty and I had to put my head between my knees to keep from passing out. When I could breathe again, I checked the numbers a 3rd time, then a 4th. I looked up news articles. Every source confirmed it. One winner, Michigan, Christmas Eve drawing, $100 million. I was that winner. My first instinct was to call my mother, to share the news, to finally have something that would make her proud of me. My finger hovered over her contact and then I remembered. I remembered the porch. I remembered the cold. I remembered watching through the window as they laughed without me. I remembered Genevieve wearing my gift like a trophy. I put my phone down. Instead, I started researching. What do you do when you win the lottery? Every article said the same thing. Get a lawyer first. Get a financial advisor. Stay anonymous if your state allows it. Don't tell anyone, not family, not friends, not coworkers. I looked up Michigan lottery laws and felt relief flood through me. Michigan allowed some anonymity through trust claims. I could claim the prize without my name being publicly released. I spent the entire day finding the best lottery attorney in the state. His name was Philip Bancroft, and his fee was astronomical, but I didn't care. I called him the day after Christmas and explained my situation. He told me to bring the ticket to his office immediately, that we needed to photograph it, store it somewhere secure, and start the claim process. He asked if I'd told anyone and I said no. He said good, keep it that way. The process took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of maintaining my normal life while sitting on a secret that made me feel like I was going to explode. I went to work and filed medical bills. I came home to my tiny apartment and ate ramen for dinner. I scrolled through social media and saw my mother posting about their perfect Christmas, saw Genevieve's photos captioned with "Family is everything." There wasn't a single picture of me. It was like I didn't exist. My mother texted me once during those 2 weeks. She asked if I could lend Genevieve $500 for an emergency. I replied asking what the emergency was, and she said Genevieve needed a new handbag because her current one had a broken strap. I didn't respond. My mother sent a follow-up text saying my silence was very hurtful and family was supposed to help family. I blocked all of them. Constance, Leonard, Genevieve. I blocked their numbers, blocked them on social media, cut every line of communication. Philip set up a trust to claim the prize. We called it the Phoenix Trust. He said it was fitting since I was rising from the ashes of my old life. The claim was filed and approved. The news reported that a Michigan resident had claimed the $100 million jackpot with identity protected through a trust. I chose the lump sum payment, which came to $64 million after federal and state taxes. $64 million. More money than I could comprehend. The first thing I did was pay off every cent of debt I had. Student loans, credit card, medical bills from when I'd broken my arm at 23 and couldn't afford the hospital visit, all gone. The second thing I did was buy myself a house. Nothing ostentatious, just a nice 3-bedroom home in a different suburb with good schools and quiet neighbors. The third thing I did was quit my job. I gave proper 2 weeks' notice and told them I'd gotten a better position out of state. My coworkers threw me a small goodbye party and I felt guilty lying to them, but Philip had warned me that telling anyone about the money was dangerous. I moved into my new house and bought furniture that wasn't secondhand. I stocked my kitchen with food I actually wanted to eat instead of whatever was cheapest. I paid for a full year of therapy up front. I donated $50,000 to the local women's shelter. I set up a savings account that would generate enough interest that I'd never have to work again. And through it all, my family had no idea. They thought I'd simply moved away for a job. They had no clue that the daughter they'd humiliated was now wealthier than they'd ever be. 3 weeks after I'd claimed the prize and moved into my new house, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Aunt Margot. She said she'd gotten my new number from a mutual cousin and asked if we could meet for coffee. She said she missed me and wanted to make sure I was okay after what happened at Christmas. Her voice sounded genuinely concerned and I felt my guard drop slightly. Margot had been the only one to show me any kindness that night. Maybe she really did care. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Margot arrived looking nervous, her hands fidgeting with her purse strap. We ordered drinks and sat in a corner booth. She asked how I was doing and I said fine, that I'd made some life changes and was in a better place. She nodded and said she was glad. Then she said she couldn't stand how Constance and the others had treated me. She said she should have done more, should have stood up for me, and she was sorry. I felt tears prick my eyes. Finally, someone was acknowledging what had happened. Finally, someone was validating the pain I'd felt. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, told her it meant everything to hear her say that. She squeezed back and then her expression changed. She asked about the lottery ticket she'd given me, asked if I'd checked it. My blood went cold. I pulled my hand back and wrapped it around my coffee cup. I asked why she wanted to know, and she said she'd just been curious, wondered if it had won anything. I could feel the trap closing around me, but I tried to play it off. I said I thought I'd lost it, asked if it had been worth anything. Margot's eyes went hard. She said I knew exactly what it was worth. She said she'd seen the news about a winning ticket sold at the Quick Mart. Same store, same date. She wasn't stupid. The nice aunt routine vanished completely. Margot leaned forward and said that ticket was legally hers. I tried to argue that she'd given it to me as a gift and she laughed. She said gifts could be contested, especially gifts worth $100 million. She wanted half, $32 million. If I didn't give it to her, she'd tell the whole family that I'd won and she'd sue me for theft. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I asked her how she could do this and she said I'd left her no choice. She'd bought that ticket with her own money. She had the receipt to prove it. She claimed she'd given it to me to check, not to keep. If I tried to claim it was a gift, she'd say I was lying. She'd say I'd stolen it. She'd tell everyone that I was a thief who'd taken advantage of her kindness. Then came the real threat. She said if I didn't pay up, she'd call Constance immediately. She said I should imagine what would happen when my mother found out I was secretly rich. Constance would sue me. Genevieve would sue me. Leonard would sue me. They'd all come after me with lawyers and I'd spend years in court fighting them. By the time it was over, I'd have nothing left. But if I just gave Margot half, she'd keep quiet. She'd protect me from them. I told her I needed time to think. She said I had 48 hours to transfer the money or she was making that phone call. Then she left. Didn't even pay for her coffee. I sat there shaking, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The one person I'd thought was on my side had just revealed herself to be another predator. I called Philip immediately. He listened to everything and then told me not to communicate with Margot further. He said if she'd given the ticket as a gift, she had no legal claim regardless of who purchased it. The note she'd written proved intent. If she tried to sue, she'd lose. I asked what would happen when she told my family and he said we'd deal with that when it came. He advised me to change my locks, install a security system, and alert my bank about potential fraud attempts. 48 hours passed. I didn't contact Margot. I didn't send her any money. I waited to see if she'd follow through on her threat. She did. She called my mother and told her everything. She said she'd given me a lottery ticket for Christmas and she was certain it had won big. She said I was hiding money from the family. My mother apparently didn't believe it at first because I'd spent years being poor. But Margot planted the seed. She told Constance to check the news, to do the math. Winner claimed through trust the same week. Timing matched. Suddenly my mother was very interested in my sudden move and new phone number. Saturday morning, 1 week after Margot's threat, I woke to aggressive pounding on my front door. I pulled on a robe and checked the security camera I'd installed. My stomach dropped. Constance, Leonard, Genevieve, and Margot were all standing on my porch. They'd found my address somehow. I briefly considered not answering, but the pounding got louder. Leonard yelled that they knew I was home and they weren't leaving until we talked. I opened the door and they pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. They walked into my living room and I watched their eyes sweep over the new furniture, the big television, the artwork I'd bought because I actually liked it. Genevieve immediately started interrogating me about how I could afford all this on my salary. I said I'd gotten a new job with better pay and she called me a liar. Constance said Margot had told them everything and they wanted the truth. I stood in my own home feeling like I was on trial. My mother demanded to know if I'd won the lottery. I asked why that mattered and she said because if I'd won using Margot's ticket, the money belonged to the family. I pointed out that Margot gave it to me as a gift. Margot jumped in and said she never said it was a gift. She claimed she'd asked me to check it with the understanding we'd split any winnings. It was a blatant lie and we both knew it, but she was sticking to her story. Genevieve started crying fake tears and said Mom had sacrificed everything for me. She said I owed them. Leonard pointed his finger at me and said a daughter who hid wealth from her struggling family was no daughter at all. I almost laughed at the word struggling when they lived in a 4-bedroom house and Genevieve had never worked a real job in her life. Then they laid out their demands and I realized that coordinated this whole thing. Margot wanted $32 million. She said that was half and it was fair. Constance wanted $20 million for raising me. She said that was compensation for 18 years of feeding me, housing me, and giving me opportunities. Genevieve wanted $15 million for emotional damages. She claimed my jealousy and negativity over the years had traumatized her and she deserved compensation. Leonard wanted $8 million for tolerating me in his home after he married my mother. I did the math in my head. They wanted $75 million total. I'd received $64 million after taxes. They wanted more than I actually had and they knew it. This wasn't about fair division. This was about taking everything and leaving me with nothing. Something inside me snapped. I started laughing and I couldn't stop. They stared at me like I'd lost my mind and maybe I had. I asked if Genevieve had really just demanded $15 million for emotional damages. I said the woman who stole $40 from my wallet 2 weeks ago wanted $15 million because I was jealous. Constance told me not to bring up old accusations and I turned on her. I said, old accusations? What about the porch? I said you made me eat Christmas dinner on the porch in freezing weather while you all laughed inside. Constance said I was being difficult and that's why I'd been asked to eat outside. I said I'd asked for a seat at the table and she'd chosen to humiliate me instead. Genevieve rolled her eyes and said I was so dramatic. It was one dinner. I lost it. I shouted that it wasn't one dinner. It was every dinner, every birthday, every holiday, my entire life. I listed everything. The stolen money, the denied financial aid forms, the constant criticism, the favoritism, the re-gifted presents. I said they'd never loved me and they'd only seen me as someone to use. Constance slapped me across the face. The sound echoed in my living room. My cheek burned and my eyes watered, but I didn't back down. She told me I had 1 week to transfer the money or they were filing a lawsuit. Leonard said they'd claim elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud. Genevieve said they'd go to the media and tell everyone I'd stolen from my sick elderly mother. Margot said she'd testify that I'd stolen her ticket. They'd all coordinated their stories. They'd all decided to destroy me together if I didn't hand over money I'd won fair and square. They left as a unified group, already discussing their legal strategy loud enough for me to hear. The message was clear. Give them what they wanted or they'd ruin me. I stood in my living room with my cheeks still stinging and called Philip again. This time I told him to prepare for war. Philip listened to everything and then said what I'd been afraid to hear. They were going to sue regardless of what I did or didn't do. Giving them money would only make them demand more. Our best option was to be ready with a counterattack that would destroy their credibility completely. We needed to document everything and gather witnesses who could testify to their pattern of behavior. I started with what I had. The security cameras I'd installed had caught the entire confrontation. I had video of them barging into my home without permission, of Constance slapping me, of all their demands and threats. Philip said that was excellent, but we needed more. We needed to establish a pattern, going back years. We needed people who'd witnessed the abuse, and would say so under oath. I reached out to extended family members I'd stayed in touch with despite my mother's best efforts to isolate me. My cousin Bethany responded immediately. She said she'd be happy to testify about the years of favoritism she'd witnessed at family gatherings. She remembered Thanksgivings where I'd served everyone dinner and eaten last with whatever was left over. She remembered birthdays where Genevieve got huge parties and I got a card if I was lucky. She said watching my family treat me like garbage had made her sick for years and she was glad I was finally fighting back. A former neighbor named Curtis said he'd testify too. He remembered an incident when I was 16 where Constance had screamed at me in the driveway for 20 minutes, calling me worthless and stupid because I'd forgotten to take the trash out. Had almost called the police, it was so bad. Had always wondered what happened to the sad girl next door. I dug through boxes of old school papers and memories I kept despite knowing my mother never cared. Report cards showing straight, as that Shed never acknowledged. Awards for academic achievement Shed never attended ceremonies for. Medical records from when I'd broken my arm at 12 falling off my bike and Constance hadn't even visited me in the hospital because she was taking Genevieve to a movie. Philip's team found even more. Bank records showing that when I was 17, before I turned 18, my mother had access to my savings account. Shed withdrawn money 3 times without telling me, $600 total that I'd earned working at the grocery store. I'd thought I'd miscounted my deposits. Shed stolen from me for years and I hadn't even realized it. We pulled text message history going back 5 years. Message after message of Constance asking for money and never saying thank you. Demands that I help pay for Genevieve's car insurance because she was family. Requests that I contribute to holiday dinners I wasn't even invited to. A pattern of financial exploitation disguised as family obligation. Social media provided even more evidence. Constance's Facebook was filled with posts praising Genevieve. Pictures of the two of them together, captions about her amazing daughter, shares of Genevieve's selfies with heart emojis. I searched for mentions of me and found almost nothing. One post from 3 years ago saying both my girls on Genevieve's birthday. I wasn't even in the photo. In the comments, someone had asked about me and Constance had replied that I was going through a difficult phase. I'd been 25 years old. Email records showed me requesting help with college applications when I was 18. My mother's response had been figure it out yourself. It asked if Shed attend my community college graduation, and Shed said she couldn't make it because Genevieve had a hair appointment that day. Years of evidence showing I'd tried to maintain a relationship and been rejected over and over. Then the lawsuits arrived. Constance filed claiming the lottery ticket had been obtained through fraud and undue influence. She said Margot had only given me the ticket for safekeeping and I'd stolen it. She was suing for $50 million. Genevieve filed separately claiming emotional distress and loss of family unity. She said my sudden wealth had torn the family apart and she deserved $15 million in damages. Leonard joined the suit claiming parental alienation. Margot filed her own suit for breach of trust and theft. Local media picked up the story. Family feud over $100 million lottery win. My name wasn't released but my family sold their narrative to anyone who'd listen. They painted themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter who'd stolen from them and refused to share. They went on local news and cried about how it abandoned them. They set up a GoFundMe asking for help with legal bills that got flooded with negative comments from people who saw through their act. Philip told me to prepare for this to get uglier. He said we were going to expose everything, every text message, every witness, every cruel act. The public would know who they really were. We filed a countersuit for defamation, harassment, and emotional abuse. The trial date was set for 3 months away. The longest 3 months of my life were about to begin. The courtroom was packed with people I'd never met. Local reporters, curious onlookers, distant relatives who'd heard about the family drama and wanted front row seats. I sat next to Philip wearing a simple navy dress and no jewelry. Across the aisle, Constance wore an expensive black suit I knew Shed bought specifically for court. Genevieve was in pearls and a dress that screamed him a victim. Leonard looked uncomfortable in a tie. Margot sat ramrod straight trying to appear righteous. Constance's attorney opened with a sob story. He painted her as a devoted mother who'd sacrificed everything for an ungrateful daughter. He showed carefully selected photos of my childhood, moments where Constance had managed to smile at the camera. He talked about the burden of being a single mother after my father died, about how hard Shed worked to provide for me, about how deeply I'd hurt her by cutting off contact. He said all she wanted was what was fair, a share of money that had come through family. Then Philip stood up for the opening statement and the temperature in the room changed. He thanked the jury for their time and then he said this case wasn't about money. It was about a lifetime of abuse. He had the bailiff set up a large photograph on an easel. It showed a table set for 6 people with beautiful place settings. Then he showed a second photo taken from a different angle. Me sitting alone on the porch, visible through the window, holding a paper plate in the cold. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Philip let the image sit there while he spoke. He said the plaintiff wanted the court to believe Shed loved and supported her daughter. But on Christmas Eve, Shed forced that daughter to eat dinner alone in 28-degree weather rather than make room for her at the table. He said if that was love, he'd hate to see what neglect looked like. Constance took the stand first and played her role perfectly. She cried, describing how hurtful my silence had been after Christmas. She said Shed always treated both daughters equally and loved them the same. She claimed she just wanted her family whole again and couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Her lawyer asked about the porch incident and Constance said Wed had limited seating, implying it was a practical decision rather than a punishment. Philip's cross-examination destroyed her. He asked where my seat was at Christmas dinner. Constance said that had limited chairs. He pointed out that had 6 chairs and 6 people before I was excluded, making 7 total. He asked why I was the one who had to leave. Constance said it'd been difficult. He asked her to define difficult. She stumbled, said it'd complained about the seating arrangement. He asked if wanting to eat with family on Christmas was unreasonable. She said it'd overreacted. Then Philip played the security footage from my house. The courtroom watched Constance and the others barge in uninvited. They heard every demand for money, every threat, every cruel word. They saw Constance slap me. The jury's faces showed shock and disgust. Constance tried to claim the video was taken out of context. Philip asked what context made slapping your daughter acceptable. She had no answer. He presented the text messages next. Years of Constance demanding money and offering nothing in return. He showed the social media posts that mentioned Genevieve constantly and me never. He presented testimony from Bethany, who described watching the favoritism play out over decades. Constance kept saying that wasn't how it was, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her credibility shattered piece by piece. Genevieve was even worse on the stand. She couldn't hide her entitlement, couldn't fake humility convincingly. She claimed it'd always been jealous of her success, and that jealousy had damaged her emotionally. Philip asked what success she was referring to. Genevieve said she was between opportunities. He asked how long she'd been between opportunities. She said a few years. He produced employment records showing Shed never held a job longer than 3 months in her entire adult life. Philip showed financial records, proving Constance and Leonard had paid all of Genevieve's expenses for 25 years while I'd worked 2 jobs through college. He asked how Genevieve had been damaged by my jealousy. She said it always made her feel bad about herself. He asked for examples. She couldn't provide any. He asked if maybe Shed felt bad because deep down she knew the favoritism was wrong. She snapped that I'd had more than she did, so it wasn't fair. The mask slipped completely. Shed just admitted in open court that Shed felt entitled to take from me because I'd earned money through work. Margot took the stand claiming the lottery ticket had been a loan, not a gift. She said Shed expected me to share any winnings. Philip presented the note Shed written. Sometimes luck changes. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. He asked the jury what that sounded like. Margot insisted it didn't prove anything. He asked why Shed written Merry Christmas if it wasn't a Christmas gift. She said it was just a figure of speech. He asked if Shed given me a receipt for the loan or any written agreement about splitting winnings. She admitted she hadn't. The judge asked her directly if Shed given me a lottery ticket on Christmas with a Christmas message, but it wasn't a Christmas gift. Margot had no good answer. Then I took the stand. Philip asked me to describe my childhood and I did, simply and honestly. I talked about the favoritism, the constant criticism, the stolen money, the denied opportunities. I didn't cry or scream, I just told the truth. I explained that I'd worked 2 jobs at 15 to save money. Mom kept borrowing. I described being forced to apologize to Genevieve for accusing her of theft while my money was literally in her pocket. I talked about the porch. The jury was in tears. Philip asked what I would have done if my family had just loved me, and I said I would have given them anything they wanted. I said all I'd ever wanted was to be seen as part of the family instead of the burden. I said the lottery didn't change who I was, it just gave me resources to finally escape people who'd never valued me. The courtroom was silent except for sniffling. Even the judge looked affected. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the 4 persons stood and read the verdict. All claims filed by Constance, Genevieve, Leonard, and Margot were dismissed with prejudice. That meant they couldn't refile or try again. The judge had found their suits to be without merit and filed in bad faith. Then came the countersuit verdict. The jury found in my favor for defamation and harassment. They awarded me $2 million in damages to be paid jointly by all 4 plaintiffs. The judge addressed the courtroom before dismissing everyone. She said she'd seen a lot of family disputes in her career, but this was one of the most disturbing. She stated clearly that the evidence showed a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and favoritism spanning decades. She said the lottery ticket had obviously been a gift and trying to claim otherwise was fraudulent. She granted a permanent restraining order preventing Constance, Leonard, Genevieve, and Margot from contacting me in any way. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. My attorney had managed to keep my full name out of most coverage, but my family's names were public record. Headlines the next day read: Lottery winner forced to eat on porch, family sued for abuse. The story went viral. People were outraged. Social media exploded with support for me and fury at my family. Constance and Genevieve's full names were released publicly. Their social media accounts were flooded with thousands of comments calling them cruel, heartless, greedy. People found Constance's employer. She worked as an administrator at an elementary school, and parents started a petition to have her removed. They didn't want someone who'd abused their own daughter working with children. She was fired within a week. Genevieve had been trying to build an Instagram following as a lifestyle influencer. Every post she made was buried under comments about the porch dinner. Her follower count dropped from 12,000 to 300. Brands that had sent her free products demanded them back. Leonard's small accounting business suffered as clients left. Nobody wanted to work with someone who'd enabled child abuse. Margot lost her nursing license after an ethics investigation. Turns out, attempting to extort a family member was grounds for professional consequences. They'd all become pariahs in the community. Neighbors stopped waving. Family members cut them off. Invitations to events dried up. Genevieve posted a tearful apology video online that was clearly scripted by a lawyer. She said she was sorry for everything and blamed stress for her poor judgment. The comments section was brutal. People said it was too late. That she'd shown her true character. Someone made a compilation video of all the evidence from the trial set to sad music. It got 5 million views. Constance attempted an interview with a local news station trying to salvage her reputation. The interviewer asked her directly why I'd eaten dinner on the porch. Constance said they'd had limited seating. The interviewer asked why she hadn't given me her own chair. Constance stammered that she was the host and needed to be at the table. The interviewer asked if being a host was more important than including her daughter on Christmas. Constance got defensive and said I was twisting everything. The interview made everything worse. Clips of her saying she'd needed to be at the table more than her daughter needed to be included went viral as examples of narcissistic parenting. The financial destruction was equally complete. They had to pay me $2 million in damages. That forced them to sell the 4-bedroom house and move into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a worse neighborhood. The proceeds from the house sale barely covered the judgment after they paid off their mortgage and legal bills. Genevieve had to get an actual job for the first time in her life. She ended up working retail at a department store where customers regularly recognized her from the news coverage and asked pointed questions about family values. Constance and Leonard both struggled to find new work because their names brought up the lawsuit whenever anyone searched for them online. Margot filed for bankruptcy. Someone created a parody GoFundMe called Help Mallory Buy More Porch Furniture. It raised $50,000 that was donated to a domestic abuse charity in my name. The organizer said they wanted to support real victims instead of fake ones. My family tried to start their own crowdfund for legal defense bills, but it failed spectacularly. The page was flooded with negative comments and raised only $200 before being shut down. 6 months after the trial, Genevieve showed up at my house drunk. My security cameras caught everything. She pounded on the door, screaming that I'd ruined her life, that Shed had nothing and I'd taken everything. I stayed inside and called the police while speaking through the Ring camera. I told her Shed always had everything. Shed just never appreciated it. She broke down crying on my porch, saying Mom didn't talk to her anymore and it was all my fault. Police arrived and arrested her for violating the restraining order. She served 30 days in jail. Constance didn't visit her once. The final irony was watching Genevieve experience what I'd felt my whole life. Being the scapegoat. Being blamed for everything. Being discarded when convenient. After the trial, after the media attention faded, after my family's destruction was complete, I had to figure out who I was beyond the abuse. I'd spent 28 years being told I was worthless, difficult, too sensitive. Now I had freedom and resources and no idea what to do with them. So I started by building something meaningful. I used my wealth wisely, hiring a financial advisor who set up trusts and investments that would support me for life. Then I started giving back. I donated $5 million to organizations supporting abused children and adults escaping toxic families. I created a scholarship fund specifically for young people whose families refused to support their education. I called it the Margot Fund as a private joke, using my aunt's name for something that actually helped people instead of hurt them. The scholarship covered tuition, housing, and living expenses for students who'd been financially cut off by abusive parents. 20 students received full rides the first year. I reconnected with cousin Bethany properly. We'd been friendly before but never close because Constance had discouraged it. Now we met for coffee weekly and built a genuine friendship. She apologized for not doing more when we were growing up and I told her she'd been a kid too. She'd done what she could by testifying. She introduced me to her friend group and for the first time in my life, I had people who wanted to spend time with me just because they enjoyed my company. I found a support group for people who'd survived family scapegoating. Sitting in that room listening to others share their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. There were dozens of people who'd been blamed for everything, criticized constantly, treated as less than. We shared coping strategies and celebrated victories. When someone went no contact with their abusers, we cheered. When someone stood up to a narcissistic parent, we supported them. It was the family I'd always needed. Therapy became a regular part of my life. My therapist helped me process decades of trauma. She said I'd been grieving a mother I'd never actually had, mourning a relationship that had only existed in my imagination. Constance had never been capable of the love I'd desperately wanted from her. Accepting that was painful but freeing. I hadn't failed to earn her love. She'd failed to give it. The realization hit me during one session. I'd thought I'd lost my family when I cut them off. But the truth was I'd never had a family. It had people who shared my DNA and used me as an emotional punching bag. Real family didn't make you eat dinner on a porch. Real family didn't steal from you and gaslight you and demand money they hadn't earned. I'd spent years chasing something that had never existed. Now I could build the family I actually deserved. Bethany introduced me to her childhood friend Wesley. He was a carpenter, kind and grounded, from a healthy family that actually liked each other. We started dating slowly because I had trust issues that needed working through. The first time I met his family, I almost had a panic attack. His mother hugged me at the door. His father asked me genuine questions about my work and hobbies. His sister included me in conversation naturally. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the criticism, for the coldness. It never came. Thanksgiving at Wesley's family home broke something in me. His mother set the table and counted everyone carefully to make sure there were enough chairs. When they sat down to eat, Wesley pulled out my chair and his father said grace, thanking God for new friends joining their family. I started crying and couldn't stop. Wesley held my hand while I sobbed through dinner. His mom came around the table and hugged me, said whatever I'd been through I was safe now. They didn't know the full story, but they knew I was hurt and they offered comfort without demanding explanation. That was what family was supposed to be. Wesley and I moved in together after a year. I was terrified of combining lives with another person, but he was patient. He never raised his voice. He never criticized me for small mistakes. He never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. He just loved me steadily and showed me every day that I deserved kindness. 2 years after the trial, I ran into Constance in a grocery store parking lot. Our eyes met across the lot, and for a moment time stopped. She looked older, tired, bitter. I could see her mouth forming words, see her taking a step toward me. I simply turned, got in my car, and drove away. I didn't feel anger or fear or hope. I just felt nothing. Her power over me was completely gone. She was a stranger who'd once hurt me badly, but couldn't hurt me anymore. The encounter made me realize how far it'd come. I didn't think about them much anymore. Days would pass without Constance or Genevieve crossing my mind. When I did remember, it was with distant pity rather than pain. They were becoming memories that no longer controlled me. Now I'm 30 years old. I live in a home I love with a man who treats me with respect. I'm surrounded by chosen family who show up for me consistently. I have hobbies and friends and therapy and peace. People ask if I regret how things turned out. They ask if I wish my birth family had just loved me so we could have shared the money happily. But here's what I've learned through all of this. Some people aren't capable of love. They're only capable of using others. My mother didn't make me eat Christmas dinner on the porch because I was difficult. She did it because she could. Because hurting me made her feel powerful. Because she'd spent my entire life needing someone beneath her and I'd filled that role. The lottery didn't change who I was. It just gave me the resources to escape who they'd wanted me to be. I lost a family I never really had, but I gained a life I never thought I deserved. The money was life-changing, but the real jackpot was freedom. Freedom from people who made me feel worthless. Freedom from the desperate need for approval from someone incapable of giving it. Freedom to build a life on my own terms surrounded by people who chose to love me. If you're the scapegoat in your family, please hear this. It's not your fault. You're not too sensitive, too difficult, too much, or not enough. You're just a person who deserves love, and if your family can't provide it, that's their failure, not yours. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and build the life they said you didn't deserve. I ate Christmas dinner on a porch at 28 years old. Now I'm 30 and every meal is at my own table, surrounded by people who chose to love me. Last Christmas, Wesley and I hosted dinner. The table was full of friends, his family, Bethany, and members of my support group. Before we ate, someone asked if we should say grace. I looked around at all those faces full of warmth and acceptance. I said I was grateful for everyone there, grateful they'd chosen to be in my life, grateful they'd chosen me. I said that was all the grace we needed. There's an empty chair in the corner of my dining room, not for family who might return but as a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. Sometimes the family you make is so much better than the family you're born into. That crumpled lottery ticket didn't just give me money. It gave me the power to choose my own family, and I chose wisely. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you ever been blamed for things that weren't your fault or treated as less than you deserved? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's support each other. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe so you don't miss more stories about people who fought back and won. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from toxic family. And remember, you deserve a seat at the table. If someone won't give you one, build your own table. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there realize they're not alone. Wishing you all the love and peace you deserve, especially during the holidays when family dynamics can be hardest. You're stronger than you know. Take care of yourselves.